Hello there! Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing great, and I'm so delighted you've joined me for part 2 of our story tonight. So before we get started, don't forget to go and get yourself a lovely drink, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. 2 weeks later, it was late afternoon on a Tuesday when Scarlett returned from the store and was in the process of unloading all the shopping in the cupboards, with both of her teenage boys rummaging around through the bags to find some snacks for themselves. Honestly, if you two boys keep snacking the way you do before dinner, you'll have no appetite left whatsoever. All the dietary guidelines tell you to have 3 meals a day and to avoid snacking in between. "Relax, ma'am, will you?" said Laurie, opening a bag of salted peanuts, which she munched hungrily. "When have we ever not been hungry? You know me. I could eat a horse most days of the week. Snacking isn't going to put me off dinner tonight. I can assure you of that." "I don't know where it goes to," said Scarlett. "You two kids eat enough calories between the two of you to support an entire football team, and you're still so skinny. I don't understand it at all." "It's because we're growing, ma'am. By the way, what are we having for dinner tonight?" "You ask me what we're having for dinner tonight with a mouthful of peanuts? Oh, you boys, honestly." "The peanuts are hors d'oeuvres," said Spencer, who was also cheekily tucking into a packet of his own peanuts. "I thought I'd make spaghetti and meatballs. How will that do you?" "Sounds yummy, mummy," said Spencer, pouring himself a long glass of milk, which left a white moustache over his lip. All of a sudden there was a loud knock at the front door. "Who's that?" asked Scarlett. She glanced at the clock. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Who would be paying them a call this late? She trotted over to the door, and her heart almost missed a beat when standing there in the doorway was Constance Cunningham, her new neighbour. This was the last person she wanted to meet. Scarlett found herself trembling when she met the woman's cold gaze. She was standing in the doorway, wearing a black cotton dress that floated above her skinny ankles and accentuated her very pronounced collarbone, which was highlighted still further by the curious pendant that she wore around her neck. The woman followed Scarlett's gaze and smiled. She picked up the pendant in her fingers. "This is my shark tooth medallion," she said proudly. "I've had it for years. I believe it brings me so much good luck. I never ever take it off." The woman stretched out a hand to shake Scarlett's. Scarlett noticed her icy grip. Very, very strong it was. "I'm Constance Cunningham, by the way, your new neighbour. I'm so sorry, I've been meaning to pop around to see how you are and to introduce myself, but I've been so dreadfully busy. You know how it is. I was wondering if you could be so kind as to spare me a cup of sugar. I'm making a peach cobbler tonight, and I've run out of ingredients." "Oh, of course," said Scarlett. "Please come in. I've only got back from the store, and as it happens, I do have a bag of sugar that you can have. I always buy extra, as I have 2 hungry boys always on the go." "That's most kind of you, dear, most kind. Aren't the people in this neighbourhood quite charming? Everyone has made me feel right at home." "Where are you from?" asked Scarlett. "Albuquerque, New Mexico. So what brings you to this part of the world? It's quite a change of scene, I should imagine." "I have a friend who lives in these parts, and well, you know, I took a drive one evening, and I saw the red-bricked houses on the street, and let's just say it was love at first sight. I knew I had to live here." "You're not married?" "Goodness gracious me, no. I'm an independent woman who desires a solo lifestyle. I don't need a man. I enjoy the quiet, peaceful life, you see." The woman glanced around Scarlett's house approvingly as Scarlett led her through to the kitchen. "You've got very good taste, if you don't mind my saying so. Your furnishings are quite marvellous, really rather lavish. Who have we got here?" she asks, as her eyes darted from Laurie to Spencer, who was still eating peanuts in the kitchen, and looked up curiously when their mother entered the kitchen, with a stranger following behind. "These are my 2 hungry boys I was telling you about. They never have enough food. In truth, they eat us out of house and home all the time. I spend half my life at the grocer's replenishing the food stores, you know. I can have a huge container of ice cream in the freezer one day, and the next day it's completely finished. It's like my pantry has worms. This is Laurie, and this is Spencer. Boys, this is our new next-door neighbour, Constance Cunningham, who is living in Petra's old house. I'm so pleased to meet you, says Constance, reaching out to shake the boys' hands one by one. Let me guess, she says, pointing at Laurie. You're 14. How did you know? I'm tall for my age. Everybody thinks I'm much older than 14. Most think I'm 17. Just a hunch. And you, she said, looking at Spencer. 16, perhaps? You're good, said Spencer, grinning. Like my brother, I'm tall for my age. He pauses for a moment and then comes quickly to the point with the bluntness of a candid teenager. Is it true that you blackmailed the estate agent to sell you the house next door? I understand there were lots of interested buyers, 'cause let's not kid. Everyone wants to own Petra's yard. It's like having the Hanging Gardens of Babylon next door. That's what everybody says around here. Constance raises her brow. Something like that, she smiled. I mean, you have to be artfully persuasive if you want something, don't you? Otherwise someone might snatch it from right under your nose, and we can't have that, can we? You're right. With a yard like that, I knew I had a fight on my hands. So I dipped into my pocket and paid the estate agent a large incentive for his favour to smile down upon me favourably. And it most certainly did, I'm glad to say. That's cool, said Spencer, grinning. Really cool. That's what you call thinking outside of the box. Or being very sly, said Laurie, giving Constance a cheeky grin. He reaches out to examine the shark-tooth medallion on her neck. Is this what I think it is? He asks. A shark tooth? You're right on the money, dear. But this is not just an ordinary shark tooth. This is a shark tooth of a man-eater, responsible for eating 3 deep-sea fishermen. You're kidding. You're not winding me up, are you? Is that actually true? Oh, absolutely. The remains were discovered in the shark's body. He'd taken huge bites out of the 3 men. Their boat capsized out at sea. That's incredible. It is, isn't it? I consider it my lucky charm. I never take it off, not even when I have a bath. Scarlett handed a bag of sugar to Constance. That's for your peach cobbler, she said. Peach cobbler, said Laurie, his mouth hanging open. He looked like he was drooling, like a dog does over a bone. Yes, I'm making peach cobbler. I can bring you over some if you like. There'll be plenty left over, as it's only me that'll be eating it. You're kidding, said Laurie. That would be incredible. And as Constance had promised, the boys were supplied with a plethora of peach cobbler, along with other delicious desserts in the weeks that followed, so that the Everdene kids thought that the arrival of Constance Cunningham, the woman who wore a shark tooth around her neck, to their green leafy neighbourhood, had been a gift from the gods. For many will tell you that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach, and the Everdene kids, with their robustly healthy appetites, were no exception to this rule. Let's just say that even if Constance Cunningham was not blessed with green fingers, like her predecessor Prt2 had been, the woman could cook, so the Everdene family weren't at all surprised to learn that she was a skilled caterer by profession, cooking food for fabulous banquets and private parties, all who raved about the high quality of her food. Scarlett had once heard that you should always be suspicious of skinny cooks, and she secretly wondered how someone who turned out such calorie-dense food could look like they hadn't eaten a decent meal a day in their lives. She wondered privately if Constance was actually anorexic. Was she a secret feeder who got her kicks from fattening everybody else around her up, while she remained steadfastly skinny? Scarlett realized her husband was right. One should never ever judge a book by its cover. That was a short-sighted thing to do. In truth, Constance Cunningham, her very austere appearance, the sharp angles of her face, the skeletal shape of her body, and those dark, cold eyes, were nothing like the real woman underneath. Constance was charming to a fault, and even Scarlett's former scepticism faded away, like the blue dye in a pair of denim jeans. As days slipped into days, weeks melted into weeks, and the icy cold winter weather had been and gone, Constance Cunningham had become a much-loved member of the local community, warming the hearts of many of the people who didn't have a bad word to say about her. "That woman is an incredible surprise," said Mrs. Montague, one of the long-established residents in the street, who lived at number 57. "Let's not kid. When she moved in here, I had my extreme misgivings about her, especially when she wears a shark tooth around her neck, of a shark that's actually eaten 3 fishermen, which is quite an extraordinary story in itself. I mean, she looked so cold, rather like a shark, actually, very unapproachable, with her cold, angular features. And it doesn't do her appearance any favours being as skinny as a rake. But surprise, surprise, she's not that half bad, you know. It was those eyes of hers that scared me a little." "You're right about that," said Mavis Riley, who lived at number 62. "When I first met that woman, she gave me the heebie-jeebies, turned my blood as cold as ice, she did. But I've changed my mind about her, done a complete 180 if you like. Maybe Constance is one of those unfortunate people that looks rather like a dangerous dog that might just bite you, but when you get to know her, all she is a cuddly teddy bear underneath." Spring had burst forth with the confident ebullience of a puppy dog. Daffodils shyly peeked out of the ground, their yellow heads blushing under the soft, teasing caresses of a spring sunshine. The wood groves were ablaze with bluebells that carpeted the forest floor in a bedazzling blue ocean. The stone-washed grass that had been incarcerated by the iron cuffs of a punishing grim winter had finally been set free, and it looked as if someone had thrown a viridescent green dye over it, bringing it all back to abundant life. Then there were the dogwoods, the saucer magnolias that were asplash with spring blossom, while the once skeletal oaks, with their claw-like hands, had had their boughs softened and bedecked with a richly verdant upholstering of fresh new leaves. No one was happier to see the arrival of spring than Scarlett was. It was a beautiful arresting day in early May, when Scarlett's husband had taken their 2 kids on a surprise impromptu trip to New York City to observe the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, and a fabulous show that had been well advertised that both her children were eager to see. Scarlett had the day all to herself. She was looking forward to nightfall, when she and Constance would spend an evening together, enjoying a light meal and a bottle of wine. "Oh, my word," Constance had said, "if you're going to be all on your own, Sim, without the kids around and without the hubby, why not pop over for a meal and some wine with me? We'll make it a girls' night in, shall we? We can watch a movie together." Little did Scarlett know that on such a seemingly auspicious evening she would be walking into a lion's den, and that time would be running out for her. It was at 7:30 that Scarlett made her way up to the polished white door of number 54. The yard was still magnificent, but not what it used to be. But that was to be expected, for without Petra, without her magical touch, it would likely soon sag under less nimble hands. It was bound to happen sooner or later. Scarlett had decided to wear black slacks and a cool cotton black top with flat sandals for the evening meal. She was a slender woman, but whenever she hung around the gaunt, emaciated figure of Constance Cunningham, she actually felt like a beached whale. So the black would make her feel marginally smaller this evening, she thought. She stood at the front door with a bottle of wine in her hand and a gleeful smile on her face. She was looking forward to having a girls' night in. Constance stood in the doorway, greeting her with a warm smile. "It is so good to see you, dear. So very good. Do please come in. Isn't it going to be fun, just the 2 of us together, spending the evening, having a girls' night in?" "I've been looking forward to it all day. Something smells incredible," said Scarlett appreciatively. "I can smell cheese, something full-bodied like a stew of some kind, and then there's a cinnamon-like smell, apples perhaps." "Very impressive," said Constance. "You've got an excellent nose on you, Scarlett. For starters, we've got cheese soufflé, followed by lamb shank and mashed potato, and then that is going to be followed by apple pie with plenty of cream." "You're joking," said Scarlet, making an approving face. "Tell me something. Have I died and gone to heaven, Constance?" "Tonight, Scarlet dear, you may very well die, and you may go to heaven. Or then again, you might just go to hell, mightn't you? If the food isn't that good," she said, in a strange tone to her voice. "Since when have you made anything that I didn't enjoy, Constance? My kids think the sun shines out of your backside, with all the puddings you make them. How can you eat so much, I ask you, and be so terribly thin? That's what I want to know. What is your secret?" "Eat so much? Goodness gracious me, Scarlet, where did you get that idea from? I might be a good cook, but I've never been a big eater, so that's why I stay so thin. I know I'm too thin, everybody tells me so, but I don't have much of an appetite. You'd look great, Constance, if you put on a few pounds. 20 pounds would look fabulous on you," Scarlet admitted. The two women talked and laughed, and Scarlet found herself getting really rather tiddly. Constance didn't stop filling her glass up with wine. "No more, Constance, you've got to stop," she giggled. "I'll be floating back home at this rate if I get any more inebriated." "I tell you what," said Constance, her face lighting up like a Christmas tree. "Why don't we go for a walk in the woodgrove tonight? Wouldn't it be lovely? The night is spectacularly beautiful." "I'm not sure it's a good idea, Constance," said Scarlet. "I'm wobbly on my feet, after all that wine you've given me. And in truth, I'm a little intimidated by the dark. Ever since I was a little girl, I was freaked out about it. I always thought there were monsters out to get me." "Are you telling me that you've never been in the woodgrove at night in spring? You have no idea what you're missing out on, dear. There is nothing to beat it. Go on, be a sport. It'll be so much fun. After all the food we've eaten tonight, it'll be a good workout for us. A little exercise would do us both good. Go on, you know you want to. It's a bit nippy out, and I'm not sure I'm wearing the most practical shoes for walking. I can lend you a pair of my sneakers, and a sweater if you like. We have the same size feet, I think." Scarlet felt cornered. She could see Constance was very eager to go for a walk in the woodgrove, but after all that delicious food and wine that they'd enjoyed, the last thing she wanted to do was to take a walk. In truth, she'd have liked nothing better than to recline on the sofa back at home, with her ginger cat Marmalade wrapped up in her arms, purring profusely. She knew Constance had been good to her family over recent months. It would be churlish to refuse her eager request. So reluctantly she agreed to go for a walk. Constance was right. It was indeed a magnificent night. Granted, there was a distinct chill in the air, as breezy gusts of wind nibbled her cheeks and neck. But in a strange way the sluggish feeling brought on by way too much wine seemed to ebb away when they were out in the cool air. The moon was bright, gleefully happy that spring had finally arrived, and shone down on them with an ebullient smile, casting an ethereal shimmering glaze over the yard, while the bright stars, like newly polished diamonds, shone brilliantly from the firmament. She was sure she could see the constellations of Taurus, Leo, and Virgo, but she didn't know much about stars. When they got to the yard fence, the boundary that separated the forest from the backyard, both women climbed under the fence and ambled towards the large congregation of trees that seemed to welcome them. Their tall, lofty silhouettes were densely dark against the smouldering pewter-coloured sky. Both women carried flashlights in their hands as they ambled down the woodland trail, where the soft light of the moon danced through the canopy of the trees. "See, didn't I tell you it was a spectacular night? And this woodgrove is beautiful," said Constance enthusiastically. The woodgrove was invigorating. Scarlet would admit that. It certainly wiped the congested cobwebs of sleep away from her eyes. But even with the twinkling moonlight and the cheerful chorus of the frogs and crickets, Scarlet suddenly had a sense of foreboding, a sense that something was dreadfully wrong. It was a vacuously empty feeling, a hollow in the pit of her stomach that just would not go away. It left a bitter taste in her mouth. "I think we should go back," she said nervously. "I think we're very far from the house now. We should make tracks, don't you think?" Constance turned around and looked directly at Scarlet. Her gaze was intense, devoid of humour or any light. and even in the light of the torch, Scarlet discerned a tenebrific look in her friend's already very dark eyes. I mean, how dark did eyes actually get? And then, to her absolute horror, Constance whipped out a sharp blade from her back pocket and pointed it directly at Scarlet. This was not happening. This couldn't be real. No, it wasn't. What the hell was Constance doing? Was this some kind of warped party joke? And Constance was pretending to be the Grim Reaper. Of course that's what it was, but this was not funny. Scarlet's jaw dropped open. Was this some kind of warped party joke? But the knife didn't look like a stage prop. It looked like the real deal. What are you doing, Constance? Don't wave a dangerous knife like that around. It's not funny. Oh, Scarlet, dear. Little Scarlet. You really are not the brightest brick in the block, are you? All this time, and you still really have no idea who I actually am. Do you? I've lived next to you for months, befriended the folk in town, got close to your family, and you still have absolutely no idea who I actually am, said Constance, purring. Who are you? Asked Scarlet, her face becoming sombre. Scarlet, Scarlet, you mean you still haven't figured it out? I'm your sister Ella, of course. Who did you think I was? But no, you can't be. There's no way. Ella is dead. We received notification from the hospital. They sent us her ashes. She is dead. I was the one, Scarlet, who sent you that notification letter, with the mental hospital letterhead to inform you of my tragic passing. And I also sent you an urn of ashes. That was easy enough to do. And you didn't even have the foresight to check those facts with the mental hospital. That would almost have certainly let the cat out of the bag for me. But you and Mother were so terribly dim, like two fused lights. Our mother had relinquished any desire to remain in touch with me. It was not difficult to get my first name changed. You can do that very easily. And that's what I did. And then I married a man soon after, and got a new surname. And after the divorce, I kept the surname. It wasn't terribly difficult to have to do. But I don't understand. Of course you don't understand. As I keep telling you, Scarlet, you're not desperately bright, are you, dear? I'm sure the hospital informed you that I was being released from their charge, provided I stuck to my medication. But I deceived them by being the perfect model patient. So after spending time in a halfway house, I was deemed healthy enough to return into society. And I enrolled in a cookery course to procure a living for myself as a freelance caterer. Then I made it my mission to find you both. And it wasn't terribly hard. You made it very easy for me. First I found our mother. Now, it wasn't difficult to mess around with her brakes, and I sat back and watched her struggle to stop her car. I watched her car flying through a red light and going head-on into a very sizable truck, and that was the end of Mother, dear. You didn't kill our mother. Scarlet froze to the spot, tears streaming down her cheeks, as she studied the sharp knife in her sister's hands, wondering what she should do. How should she escape her sister's grasp? Then, of course, I knew I needed to find you, and I did. But that bloody woman wouldn't die, so I gave her a little encouraging push, and bingo, I was able to move in next door to you, and to get right under your feet. And now that everyone knows me in the neighbourhood, as a much-loved member of the local community, when I kill you tonight, the blame will not be laid at my door. You see, Scarlet, I've had it all nicely worked out. But why? Why do you want to kill me so much? I don't understand. I'm your sister. I'm your blood relative. You mean you don't even know, Scarlet? Oh dear, you are so dreadfully dim. When you came along, our mother only ever had eyes for you. You were her world on which her access rotated around. I didn't even count. I knew if you were out of the way, our mother might finally give me some much-needed attention. I deserved her full attention, which she refused to give me. So that's why you tried to smother me with a pillow when I was a little girl. Do you know, Constance, you're seriously sick in the head. If you wonder why Mum favoured me over you, then look at yourself. You were hurting animals. No normal person hurts animals, but you had no mercy. You were awful. You broke out into violent tantrums. Mum was terrified of you. You are sick in the head, Constance. You need help, and you should be back in that mental hospital. What I need, little Scarlet dear, is with me right now. And I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to slit your throat with this very sharp knife, and then I'm going to watch you bleed out, and then I'll leave you for the wild animals to enjoy. There's a pack of coyotes living in this wood grove, always on the scrounge. I've been leaving them meat here in the forest in this very place where you're standing tonight, and I will leave your body for them to devour tonight. And once again, your death will be deemed a dreadful tragedy. I will naturally tell everybody that you came for dinner with me, and mentioned you fancied a walk in the wood grove. I told you that that was a crazy, nonsensical idea, and persuaded you against it. But obviously you didn't listen. Instead of listening to my advice, you never returned home, because they found your bones scattered all over the place. They will know you were attacked by coyotes. So very sad. Very, very sad. Tragic, tragic. Your poor husband and your 2 children. They're going to be so distressed to lose their perfectly lovely mother. Don't worry, little Scarlet. I'll take care of them once you're gone. And your death will be quick, very quick, like it was for our mother and Petra. You won't know a thing, I promise you that. Constance lunges towards her sister, grabbing Scarlet by the arm so fiercely. Scarlet freezes to the spot. Her blood turns to ice. Her throat fills with a bitter bile, and she is overcome with a feeling of impending dread. She can almost smell and taste death on the air. "Let go of me, Constance! Let go of me!" she says, trying to shake off her sister's fearsome grip. "Let go of me! Please, please don't do this! I've got children! I've got a husband! They need me! Please, please, I'm begging you! Don't hurt me!" "Plead for your life," says Constance. "Go on, plead, Scarlet. I like hearing you cry your heart out. It's a very pleasant sound." "What's the point? You're going to do what you're going to do, aren't you? Just think about my family for a moment, Constance. Have a little mercy. The mercy that you failed to show to my mother and to Petra and to so many little animals. My boys, they need a mother. Are you really that vindictive that you deprive them of that?" "I needed a mother, little Scarlet. Have you forgotten that? But you took her away from me, did you not? By stealing her heart. She locked me away in a mental hospital because of you. You are to blame for that. I was locked away for years and years, and it's your fault." Scarlet could feel the icy cold blade at her throat. She closed her eyes tightly. Her sister was holding her down with one arm, but she tried to wiggle her body out of her sister's fearsome hold. But try as she might, she could not escape her sister's formidable clutches. Constance's dark eyes burned with hatred, and Scarlet knew that her life would soon be over, like it had been for her mother and for Petra Stewart. "Any last words, Scarlet, for good time's sake?" "Please don't, Constance! Please don't! I beg you, my family need me." "I'm supposed to feel sorry for you, am I, Scarlet? Did you not stop to think that I needed my family, but you and Mother abandoned me? Now I am going to likewise abandon you to the coyotes." All of a sudden, there was a loud growl in the woodgrove. It sounded exactly like a lion, as if something very fierce was only yards away from the 2 women. Constance's eyes became fearful. She quickly removed the knife from Scarlet's neck. and glanced around. What the hell? With the knife moved away from her throat, Scarlet tried to escape her sister's clutches, but it was no use. Constance grabbed her, holding her down firmly. All of a sudden, there was a loud, raucous scream. The sound of ponderous feet. Scarlet looked up to see this huge, lofty, ambiguous creature. It had pulled Constance off her body with a powerful bulldozer-like force. Constance began to scream in terror, the knife dropping out of her hands, slipping out of her fingers like butter, landing precariously on the forest floor. The huge creature was like a blur of black, easily about 8 foot tall, with a humanoid silhouette. Scarlet watched in abject horror as this curious idiosyncratic creature threw Constance on the ground and then plucked her head off, throwing it across the woodgrove so that it rolled across the woodland trail like a soccer ball until it finally came to a stop. Scarlet was terrified as she stared at this creature. She had no idea what it was. Was it also going to hurt her, she wondered. She tried to run, but she couldn't. Her body had frozen over. The creature stood only 2 feet away from Scarlet, staring at her through deep-set, dark, benevolent eyes, filled with incredible kindness. The creature's expression seemed incongruous compared to the violent behaviour it had recently exhibited. Did it want her head too? Scarlet wondered. That was when the strange creature spoke to her in a curious language, where the words were immediately translated into her head in English, in some form of telepathic exchange. Anginassa, hunkalakanaktwati, akasikatolonopwa. I have no interest in your head. I'd like it very much to stay on your head. You mean you don't want to hurt me? Scarlet thought in her own head. But you killed my sister. I don't understand. The creature looked at Scarlet with a bemused look. Akinakila, hamokotanaswa, fikanikala nukolo. I killed your sister because she was going to kill you. This sister of yours has a very funny head. What do you mean? Asked Scarlet. Ikantila no amaki, vaganasakwa, ikinatala no sho, pakila kokwa, hisantala nakwanisi. Your sister is bad, very bad. Energy is black. She needed to go. She's been coming into the woods to feed the coyotes. I knew she was up to something bad. I could read it in her energy. It was a murderous energy. I've been watching her like a hawk ever since, every single night when she comes here. That's why I saw what she was doing to you. I knew if I didn't act quickly, you were a goner. Thank you, said Scarlet. Thank you for saving my life. Maminasi, akinatuanasa. That is fine. You were not meant to die. The strange creature escorted Scarlet back to her house. Everything's going to be fine, said the creature. Akinatuasikinapa. And then he was gone. And that was that. To cut a long story short, the town grieved the tragic loss of Constance Cunningham when she was laid to rest, all describing her as a pillar of the local community, a woman so savagely torn apart by a pack of hungry coyotes. But only Scarlet and her husband knew what had really happened. So number 53 nursed its own secret. All these years later, Scarlet was to realize the creature that saved her life that inauspicious night was a Bigfoot. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.